What's up everybody on YouTube, AJ Rest back to discuss another video, and today we're going to be talking about the biggest takeaways from NFL Week 2. Yes sir, Week 2, another week of NFL football. I will say this is the overreaction week for sure. Like I said last year and in previous years, you can't judge seasons until it's like week 9, 10, something like that, because everybody's talking about, oh, the Saints are Super Bowl contenders now, the Vikings are Super Bowl contenders. Bro, let's calm down. They look really good, I would say that for sure, but let's see some consistency. The Saints absolutely destroyed the Cowboys at their crib. That was wild. There's a lot of upsets too. We'll see how they continue to do, because Derek Carr and that offense looks really good, and I'll talk about that game later. But that was a crazy game. The Cardinals destroyed the Los Angeles Rams as well too. Kyler Murray looked great. Marvin Harrison Jr. went off in that game. I think he'll for sure be a contender for Offensive Rookie of the Year, especially with the rookie quarterbacks looking questionable so far. Also, the 49ers lost to the Vikings. Just a lot of different games to talk about. CJ Stroud and the Texans against Caleb Williams and Chicago Bears. The Los Angeles Chargers being 2-0 now. I mean, there's just a lot of different teams and conversations to be had. I mean, it was just a really good week too. And last but not least, also the matchup between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs went down to the wire. Always a great matchup seeing Joe Burrow against Patrick Mahomes played in the 2022 and 2023 AFC Championship games. So there's just a lot of intriguing games to recap, and looking forward to talking about it in this video. But with that being said, guys, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. You know what we post about here, videos about the NFL, NBA, Marvel, sports, DC, pop culture, things of that nature, cooking videos. And with that being said, let's talk about NFL Week 2. So of course we have to start off from Thursday Night Football, where the Buffalo Bills blew out the Miami Dolphins, winning 31-10. Gotta talk about the football stuff first, of course, because we know what happened to Tua. But in terms of this game, it was never really close, and I knew the Bills were gonna win this. Everybody was just picking the Dolphins by default. Everyone was just picking the Dolphins by default, saying that all the Bills are gonna have a down year. They're regressing. They got younger. They got rid of a lot of defensive players. Stephon Diggs not there anymore. Gabe Davis, all these weapons gone. Bro, Josh Allen is like that, and I don't understand why he receives so much slander from people. People anonymously saying that he's the most overrated quarterback in the league. Bro, just haters. I mean, but it is what it is. I think that he's the second best quarterback in the league, especially talent-wise too. So that's my conversation on that. He didn't have to even do too much in this game. Of course, him and James Cook have a great rapport. James Cook had 3 total touchdowns in this game. He went off rushing-wise. He had 78 rushing yards on 11 carries and 2 touchdowns. And he had a receiving touchdown as well and 17 receiving yards. And like I said, Josh Allen didn't even have to go too crazy. I mean, they relied on the running game under Joe Brady, offensive coordinator, which is going to be their identity. Josh Allen was efficient though. He completed 13 out of his 19 passing attempts. No turnovers. Had 139 passing yards and a touchdown. So just efficient football, and that defense was stout. They played great. Had a pick 6. Von Miller still on there defensively, a little older, but I mean, they were able to control the Miami Dolphins. I mean, the Dolphins had nothing going for them, and then of course we're going to roll into the Tua conversation. Of course, before the concussion, he didn't look good at all. I mean, he threw 3 interceptions. That one he was trying to throw the ball away that resulted in the pick 6, that was bad. But when we look at that concussion, when that happened, that was just tough, honestly. And there's been a lot of conversation of people saying, oh, what he should and shouldn't do. Ultimately, bro, it's not us. We're not Tua Tagovailoa. We're not his family. We're not his loved ones. Let him make the decision. We all know that playing football, it's risky, and especially with CTE and ALS and things that can linger from playing football that progresses into life after football. I mean, that's obviously the risk, but I understand it from a pride standpoint and from a player that has worked his whole life to be in the NFL. It's not easy to say, oh man, you should just retire. I advise Tua to retire. Bro, it's not that easy. So he's gonna plan to play and come back. I've already seen that after he talks to medical professionals, and I understand it, but man, it is risky. It's a slippery slope. I'm not surprised though. Just praying that in the future that he'll be able to be more smart in terms of situations like that. If he's gonna scramble, slide, bro. Make sure you slide. That's the reason, because just seeing his head go on the ground like that again and again, and even before that on the play, it hit DeMar Hamlin's chest. That's just crazy, man. So I just pray that Tua was able to get the professional help that he needs, and just being able to learn everything in terms of what this can mean beyond football and just in life and quality of life. The Dolphins, where this leads them, I don't know. I mean, they still have a lot of talent offensively and defensively, but they are who I thought they were. I already thought that they were going to be a wild card team. I've been saying that the Bills were going to win the AFC East this season. I mean, I'm not surprised, and it is week 2 obviously, so it's still early, but Josh Allen and the Bills still have their number. So there was a 10-game slate in week 2 for the noon games, and I could start with any noon game I wanted to, but I just want to talk about this game and get it over with, honestly. Last week I revealed that I'm a Cowboys fan. I'm not going to be too subjective with this because, like I said, I'm a journalist. You have to talk about things fairly and objectively. But just real quick, I had to talk about the Cowboys, man, because, bro, it's just every single, you can't even be surprised at this point. They got blown out. It felt exactly like the Green Bay Packers game, losing 44-19 against the New Orleans Saints. Absolutely bludgeoned. I mean, just like the Packers last year in that playoff game, the Saints took the ball first and ran it down their throats and scored a touchdown. Derek Carr went crazy, and he only threw the ball 16 times, completed 11 out of his 16 passing attempts, threw for 243 passing yards and 2 touchdowns and 1 interception, but that interception didn't even mean anything because the game was already over. They scored 35 points in the first half, bro. That's insane, I'm not gonna lie. And the Saints, they have scored on their first 15 possessions this season against the Panthers and against the Cowboys. I mean, they're definitely looking hot, but like I said in the intro, bro, stop overreacting to the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. And they be consistent enough. There's a lot of things that happen throughout the season in terms of adversity and things of that nature. So, bro, can they sustain this level of play? We will see. Alvin Kamara, he went crazy rushing-wise and receiving-wise. He had 20 carries for 115 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. Then also Kamara had a screenplay that went for a touchdown, having 2 receptions for 65 receiving yards and a touchdown. So he just killed the Cowboys. Rashid Shaheed did as well. He had 96 receiving yards on 4 receptions for a touchdown. I mean, they just absolutely bludgeoned the Cowboys. And there's really nothing I can say about the Cowboys offensively because Dak, he was playing behind the whole game. I hate casual people saying that, oh man, the contract's already looking bad. Bro, if you're playing behind the whole game and your defense isn't helping you, you're stuck. You're cooked, honestly, because you could score, but the Saints and whatever team they're going against is going to be run dominant is going to continue to score too. So, I mean, the things to take away from this game, the Saints, they definitely look nice in that NFC South right now. We'll see if they can be consistent because we've seen Derek Carr, like in the 2017 season, I believe, when the Raiders played well. He had an MVP type of season, but there's been some up and down seasons from him, also dealing with injuries and things of that nature. So we'll see what happens. But in his second year and the second game, they look nice so far. For the Cowboys, I mean, that run defense looks the same as it has the past few years. Not optimistic about it at all. And guess who they have to play against in week 3? The Baltimore Ravens, who, guess what, rely on the running game. And they're winless right now, but we know that they're ultimately going to be a contender and they're going to try to avoid being 0-3. So that game is going to be crazy. A lot of things on the line for both teams, and the Ravens and the Cowboys in that game. So just a lot to talk about there. But the Cowboys, man, y'all look bad. That's how you open your season after the last time you were at home getting killed by the Green Bay Packers. Being back at home, you get killed in the same type of fashion. That's awful. It felt the exact same way. So the Cowboys have to do a lot of soul searching and it looks bad right now. They definitely are a good team, but they need to wake up because they played soft. There's no other way to put it. Speaking of the Ravens, might as well talk about that game. They lost to the Las Vegas Raiders, losing 26-23. They had the lead as well in the second half, winning 23-13, and the Raiders came back. That defense was a story for the Las Vegas Raiders. Also offensively as well too. I have to talk about Gardner Minshew and give him his props because I think he had a solid game last week. They just ended up losing to the Chargers, but in this game, he played well. He completed 30 out of his 38 passing attempts, really efficient. Threw for 276 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Was also able to connect with Devontae Adams a lot. He had a signature game, having 9 receptions on 110 receiving yards and a touchdown. Rookie tight end Brock Bowers also had a really good, efficient game, had 9 receptions for 98 receiving yards. That team looked really good, but segueing back to the Raiders defense, Max freaking Crosby, one of the best defensive players in the league. I think that he's still underrated in terms of how much people don't talk about him. He had 5 solo tackles, 2 sacks on Lamar Jackson, 2 QB hits. I mean, he was just all over the field. That's the definition of being a game wrecker. So shout out to the Raiders. Being under Antonio Pierce in his full season as a head coach this year, they look good. That's a good bounce back win for them, but for the Ravens, I mean, there's a lot to talk about there. I believe Derrick Henry only had 1 rushing attempt in the 4th quarter. That's getting back into that way of how they played against Kansas City. They're not establishing their identity in the run game. Of course, I know you still have Lamar Jackson as your quarterback, who's the best running quarterback, arguably, that we've seen of all time. But you also have to understand the reason why you brought Derrick Henry as well too is to alleviate some of that pressure. Lamar Jackson having to run the ball all the time. So a lot of questions there. Their offensive line looked a little questionable. The defense wasn't able to strap up and get some stops when it mattered most against the Raiders. So like I said a second ago, the Ravens, they have to play against Dallas next week. I'm not going to lie. I do think that they'll win that game. I don't see the Ravens going 0-3. If they do, there'll be a lot of questions there because they have to play against the Bills and Bengals, I believe, too. So I don't see them going 0-3. I think that they're going to play with a lot of pride in week 3 against Dallas. They have to put it together. I mean, this team really doesn't have any excuses. They have 2 really good tight ends, of course, in Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, who has stepped up a lot, and this is just his 3rd season. Still have Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, a lot of good pieces. Also defensively, you still have Raquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton. So there's no excuses in Baltimore. I mean, you made the AFC Championship game last year. Lamar Jackson won his 2nd MVP last year. It's time to get things going because right now, you and the Bengals are 0-2. The Browns were able to win in that division, so they're 1-1. But the Steelers, they're 2-0 right now. And it is early, like I said, so that's why we can't panic and overreact to these early 2 losses, but they definitely should have won that game against the Raiders, and they need to get things right in week 3 for sure. Let's talk about the 3rd upset of the day, which took place between the Minnesota Vikings and the San Francisco 49ers, where the Vikings won 23-17. Man, I will say, I'm not gonna lie, Sam Darnold, he's been playing really good, and in this game, he completed 17 out of his 26 passing attempts, threw for 268 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and only 1 interception, and he had that great 97-yard touchdown to Justin Jefferson, which was a great play, one of the best plays of the season so far. The Vikings look good. JJ McCarthy, he got hurt, their rookie quarterback and potentially quarterback of the future, but if Sam Darnold can continue to play like this, there's gonna be some question marks. He's looking nice. Now, I will say in 2022, when he was with the Panthers, we saw a couple of game stretch where he played really good, and then he came came back to life. So really consistency, like I said about Derek Carr earlier, it comes to the same thing with Sam Darnold. Can he continue to keep his play up? We will see. He played really good. Rushing wise, the Vikings had 10 carries for 82 rushing yards from Ty Chandler. Like I said about Justin Jefferson, he had the 97-yard reception, and before being sidelined from that quad injury, he had 4 receptions for 133 receiving yards and a touchdown. Hopefully he's able to be okay. Hopefully it's not a lingering long-term injury for Justin Jefferson, because he dealt with that last year, not in terms of the quad, but just an injury in general. So just praying that he's able to be okay, because the Vikings, they look nice. Skull Nation Day, shout out to y'all. But for the 49ers, this is the second year in a row that you lost to the Vikings, and I will say that that's not a big deal in terms of your season going forward into the playoffs. But right now, I mean, it's going to be tough because Christian McCaffrey is now on injury reserve from that lingering Achilles/calf injury that he dealt with from all the training camp that kept him limited, and now you're going to be without him for the next 4 weeks and potentially could be more. Jordan Mason, I will say he has looked really good in his time starting so far in these first 2 games. He had 20 carries on 100 rushing yards and a touchdown, and I'm glad I picked him up in one of my fantasy leagues because that was clutch. So he's playing really good. I mean, that Shanahan offense is dynamic, but the Vikings defense looked really good. Great job. They were able to force Brock Purdy into some tough situations. I will say though, Brock Purdy completed 28 out of his 36 passing attempts for 319 yards, a touchdown, and 1 interception. So, I mean, overall, he played a really good game, but ultimately, the Vikings were able to have their way with the 49ers in that game. Deebo Samuel also had a really good game, receiving yards on 8 receptions for 110 yards.
In the original recording of that, I was going to say how I thought the 49ers were doing fine, but I got a notification from Bleacher Report saying that Deebo Samuel is going to miss some time with a calf strain. So, I don't know, guys. I mean, we saw last year the 49ers without Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, and Trent Williams. They still have Trent Williams, but without Deebo and Christian McCaffrey, that's really tough. I mean, the 49ers, they are a really good team, but how much can you weather?
The next game was a matchup between the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots, a Super Bowl rematch from 10 years ago, but definitely 2 totally different teams from back then. And the Seattle Seahawks won, winning 23-20. A really good game that went down to the wire. Geno Smith played really good in this game, completed 33 out of his 34 passing attempts, had a touchdown, 327 passing yards. DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba played really good games. Metcalf had 10 receptions for 129 receiving yards and a touchdown, and Jackson Smith-Njigba had 12 receptions for 117 receiving yards. So that team looks really nice so far. I mean, Mike McDonald, being the former defensive coordinator and now head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, he's really pressing into that identity for the Seahawks. They're playing really good style defense as well too. I certainly think that they'll be a contender to make the playoffs and be a wild card. It's kind of hard to say right now in terms of how they'll shape them in division, because they still are with the 49ers, with the Rams, and the Cardinals. They look really nice on Sunday, blowing out the Rams. So there's a lot of things. I mean, that's why it's just so tough in the first 2 weeks to really judge people, because the season fluctuates so much and you really can't start judging until weeks later. But for the Seahawks though, in this game, drawing it back to that, Kenneth Walker was out, Charbonnet had to play, and he had a touchdown. He didn't have the most rushing yards. The Patriots played some really good defense in terms of on the run, because Charbonnet only had 14 carries for 38 rushing yards. So we still know that the Patriots' identity is definitely on defense. Gerard Mayo being a first-year head coach, winning that game in week 1 against the Bengals was huge, and also being able to still play a really good game and have an opportunity to put the Patriots in a situation to win this one was good as well, but they ended up losing. But I don't think that the Patriots are as bad as everybody thought they were. People were saying that they could potentially be in contention for the 2025 first pick, and we will see, because it is a long season. But I think that the Patriots, they'll be respectable. I think low-key they could be like how the Cardinals were last year. They could low-key sneakily upset some contending teams in a trap game like the Cardinals did, and we already saw that in week 1. That's what the Patriots did to the Bengals. So shout out to Gerard Mayo. Shout out to the Patriots playing really good, gritty defense. Jacoby Brissett starting. Didn't have the craziest game. I think they're playing conservative football with him, just trying not to turn the ball over and playing safe. But the Patriots look nice with the Seahawks. I mean, I definitely think the takeaway from them is that they're really better than what people think, and they should be a playoff contender in the NFC. Let's talk about a couple of teams that could be contending for the first pick next year. Certainly the Giants, I think, could be. They fell to 0-2, losing to the Commanders by a field goal, 21-18. The Commanders won, and Jaden Daniels, I would say, he looked better in this game for sure. I don't think he looked awful in the first game against the Buccaneers, but certainly improved in his game 2 against the Giants. And I think a lot of people are going to look great against the Giants, honestly, but that's no discredit to him. Passing wise, Daniels was really efficient, completed 23 out of his 29 passing attempts for 226 passing yards. And on the ground, Jaden Daniels had 44 rushing yards too, but ultimately they weren't able to score a touchdown. So that's why I said that this wasn't the greatest game, but it's improvement in terms of how Daniels passed. But for the Giants though, I mean, are we surprised? And ultimately, I think that this is definitely a GM problem more than a coaching problem. You saw in 2022 what the Giants were able to do with a better roster. Brian Daboll is a good coach. He has a great mind offensively and just overall of a team. But when you give him limited players to play with, bereft of talent, I mean, this is going to be the product. They're not good. Let Saquon Barkley walk. They paid Daniel Jones all that money after the 2022 season. Just prepare for the draft, honestly. See what quarterback you can get gone and get to scouting, because man, this is just not good. I hate to talk about people like this, but Daniel Jones just doesn't look like a good NFL quarterback. Talk about another team that's bereft of talent, Carolina Panthers. They lost a huge game as the Chargers beat them, winning 26-3. I also just saw guys that the Carolina Panthers are benching Bryce Young. Certainly an interesting move. I mean, that's gonna shake his confidence some. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, you're gonna put Andy Dalton in there, and I still think nothing's gonna change. So like, if you're a Panthers fan, I'm sorry, because what are we doing? Bryce Young, he certainly has talent, but he's undersized, and like I said, there's no structure. So I don't think he should be getting the blame. Dave Canales, he talked about it a little bit more. I guess this was inevitable, but still, man, I mean, you could put anyone at the quarterback position in Carolina. It would still be ugly regardless. And like I said in the biggest takeaways from NFL Week 1, Bryce Young is already on his third offensive regime in his second season. There's just no structure. I mean, he having to learn a third playbook in his second year. I don't like that for him, and there's no talent there. I do like Xavier Legette being there, but there's just a lot of things to be compensated for. There's no talent on the team. Offensive line wise, he's in trouble every single possession. Defensively, they can't stop a nosebleed. And really, it just was like a check down game for Bryce Young, because yes, he completed 18 out of his 26 passing attempts, but he only had 84 passing yards. Like, what are we doing? I really don't want to spend too much time on teams like this, because like I said about the Giants, you can just see the terrible season coming and you can't do nothing about it. But for the Chargers though, their philosophy is different under Harbaugh, but they've been playing great. Running wise, J.K. Dobbins had another great game after playing great against the Raiders in Week 1. He had 17 carries for 131 rushing yards and a touchdown, which included a 43-yard rushing touchdown. Just playing great offensively. And Justin Herbert, we know the type of quarterback that he is, a top 10 and 12 quarterback in this league. Similar to Josh Allen in that game against the Dolphins, he didn't have to do too much. Completed 14 out of his 20 passing attempts for 130 passing yards, 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. A solid and efficient game offensively from them. Also, this is an encouraging sign for Chargers fans as well, because Quentin Johnson, their second-year wide receiver who was drafted in the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft, he had 5 receptions for 51 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, so that's really good. Chargers, I mean, they're playing pretty good so far. Like I said, it's Week 2. I'm gonna continue to emphasize that because it is very early. This season is still in a newborn phase for sure, but the Chargers, they're looking better than a lot of people figured. I expected the Raiders to win and beat them last week, and they ended up beating on them, and Chargers won this game too, so I mean, they're looking solid so far. This next game was a matchup between the Green Bay Packers and the Indianapolis Colts, and the Packers won 16-10. They were up 10-0 at one point. They played really great offensively and defensively, and of course Jordan Love is out right now. He didn't play in this game, but I will say Malik Willis, he played really good in this game. Just being traded from the Titans a few weeks ago, having to step into this game, he played nice, giving the Packers their first win, and he didn't have to do too much, but ultimately that was the game plan, to put him into comfortable positions to let the Green Bay offense flourish, and he did that. Didn't throw the ball too much, but he was efficient, completing 12 out of his 14 passing attempts at 122 passing yards and a touchdown. I think that he's going to continue to be a solid backup for Green Bay as long as he plays like this in the absence of Jordan Love, but hopefully for Packers fans, he isn't out that long. Josh Jacobs had a really physical and great running game, had 32 carries for 151 rushing yards. No touchdowns, but that's a really great and efficient game for him. That's why you brought him in from the Raiders this offseason, to establish that running game. Receiving wise, Romeo Doubs gave you 3 receptions for 62 receiving yards, and Tavion Wicks also got you a receiving touchdown. So that was a really good balance from Matt LaFleur. The offense overall, they had a great game plan against the Indianapolis Colts, and their defense played really good too, because Anthony Richardson did not have a good game at all. He threw 3 picks. He completed only half of his completions, completing 17 out of his 34 passing attempts, having 1 touchdown and 204 passing yards. I mean, that was a rough game from the Colts to say the least. And now the Colts fall to 0-2. I will say that Jonathan Taylor did have a good game. He had 12 carries for 103 rushing yards, but they need to turn things around for sure. That was a good game against the Texans that they played against in Week 1. They could have won that game, but it didn't go their way, and this game certainly didn't either. The Cleveland Browns were able to get a bounce back win, beating the Jacksonville Jaguars 18-13. That's a really encouraging sign for the Browns, because in that game against the Cowboys, they couldn't get anything going offensively, and we know how great of a defense they have, but you can only do so much when your offense can't do anything. But in this game, they were able to play better. Sean Watson, their quarterback, he played better, completing 22 out of his 34 passing attempts, 186 passing yards. He also had a rushing touchdown and had 20 rushing yards. Jerome Ford also had 64 rushing yards, and a player that I interviewed earlier this summer, Deontay Foreman, he had 14 carries for 42 rushing yards. So shout out to him. Receiving wise, Deshaun Watson and Jerry Jeudy had a solid connection, I would say, in this game. I mean, Jeudy had 5 receptions for 73 receiving yards. Nothing too crazy, but I will say it's kind of concerning that Amari Cooper only had 3 receptions, and of course he only had 11 yards. I mean, you have to be giving him the ball more. Jerry Jeudy, he's a nice young receiver, but make no mistake, Amari Cooper is still the #1 receiving option. So hopefully their offense is able to get better and get things going under Kevin Stefanski, because I think that he's a really good coach. But I will say, as they continue to play against better teams, and when they get into division play against teams like the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Ravens, they're gonna have to score more, and that's gonna be something to be said. But for the Jaguars, it's another game that y'all could have won but lost. In Week 1 against the Miami Dolphins, they had a good lead and ended up blowing it. It's really no different in terms of the execution in this game as well too. Trevor Lawrence, I mean, he had 220 passing yards, but it wasn't as efficient game out of the pocket, because he only completed 14 out out of his 30 passing attempts. I mean, that's under 50%, so that's not efficient. The rookie Brian Thomas Jr., though, he has looked really good, but he only had 2 receptions, but he did have 94 receiving yards, so that's an encouraging sign. He's able to get open and break loose against these defenses. That's really good for your rookie. But Gabe Davis only had 43 receiving yards for 3 receptions. The Jaguars, they definitely got to get things going offensively and get a week 3 win, because now they're like the Ravens in terms of being desperate to get a win. Don't want to fall into that 0-3 hole. But for the Browns, I mean, it's a good win because after week 1, everyone was able to write Deshaun Watson off and the Browns off. This game is one that I've really been looking forward to talk about. Not because the Jets got their first win, of course, shout out to Aaron Rodgers. They did win this game against the Titans 24-17. But Will Levis, bro, what are you doing? 2 weeks in a row, you just throw up the ball instead of taking a sack. That was awful. Even Ryan Callahan, the head coach, he got mad. He said, what the are you doing? I mean, it looked bad. Like, I don't know what he's doing. Will Levis is a super talented quarterback, I will say that. But those are 2 weeks in a row making those boneheaded decisions. And it is kind of selfish because, I mean, you're trying to make a play out of nothing. Just throw the ball away or just take the sack, especially in the game against the Jets on Sunday. You could have just took the sack, could have kicked the field goal. And last week against the Chicago Bears, that ended up being a pick 6. So he just has to think, really. I mean, it just comes down to that. Just be smart. Be a smart quarterback, because that was bad. He completed 19 out of his 28 passing attempts, having 192 passing yards and 1 touchdown in that interception. Calvin Ridley had 4 receptions for 77 receiving yards and a touchdown. Tony Pollard had 17 carries on 62 rushing yards. The Titans, I don't really expect too much from them this year, but I'm definitely not going to expect anything out of them if Will Levis is going to give us a meme every single week throwing the ball away like that, because that is awful. Moving on to the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers gets his first official win as a starting quarterback for the New York Jets. I guess they did win that game when he tore his Achilles, but he didn't play the whole game. I mean, come on. So he finally got his first win as a New York Jet, moving him to a 1-1 record. But a solid game, I would say. Completed 18 out of his 30 passing attempts for 176 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. And he had that one play to Garrett Wilson at the end of the game that put them in the field goal range, which is so nice. Over top fade. Garrett Wilson had to change direction of his head to catch the ball. I mean, that was a beautiful play for sure. And you can see in pre-snap motion that Aaron Rodgers changed the play a little bit to open that look up. I mean, that was nice. So, I mean, the Jets, they certainly, I believe they'll be a wild card team. But like I said about the AFC East, that's still the Bills division. I mean, that's just my opinion. But their rookie, Braylon Allen, he played really good. Only 20 years old. I mean, that's crazy. It must be pretty cool for him being 20 years old and playing with Aaron Rodgers, who's 40 years old. I mean, that's crazy. This is a really good and efficient win for the Jets, a win that they needed before their home opener next week in week 3. This game between the Bucs and Lions was a really good one, and I'm sure a lot of people favored the Lions, but the Bucs ended up winning 20-16. And I'm not surprised. I mean, bro, Baker Mayfield has been cooking. Honestly, I'm so excited for his success, how he's been playing in the first 2 games, and how he played the whole duration of the 2023 season, getting that new contract with the Buccaneers. I mean, he's really had a revitalization of his career, and he's been cooking. I mean, this is the quarterback that we saw in Oklahoma, and of course, he had some rough patches in Cleveland, but I do believe that 2020 season was really good, and they made the divisional round in that year too. So Baker has always had the talent. He's just been able to mature more and become a leader, and he had a really good game and didn't have to throw the ball too much. Completed 12 out of his 19 passing attempts for 185 passing yards, a touchdown and 1 interception. He also had a rushing touchdown that was nice too, juking people getting into the end zone. I mean, like I said, they look like Oklahoma Baker Mayfield, so shout out to him. Definitely the quarterback for the Bucs, and there's no question about that. Chris Godwin had a really good game too. 7 receptions for 117 receiving yards and a touchdown. I think because of the injuries, a lot of people forgot about Chris Godwin, but he's looked nasty in these first 2 games, so that's really a testament and a great sign for the Buccaneers. Won a division past 2 years as well. I know how the Saints look. I know that the people expect a lot of the Falcons this year too, but I still think that the Bucs should be the favorites in that division. So that's just my take on it. And that defense is still really good under Todd Bowles. So that's really good for them and encouraging going into the weeks forward. And that's also my dad's team, so shout out to him. In terms of the Lions side, like I said, I mean, I think they'll still be fine. They still should be favorites or one of the favorites with the Packers to win the NFC North. Jared Goff didn't have the best game, but he did throw for 307 passing yards, but he did throw the ball a lot too, because he completed 34 out of his 55 passing attempts. So they threw the ball a lot. Not gonna lie, they need to have a better balance in terms of the game, because you saw in the first game against the Rams, they won the game in overtime alone from the running game with David Montgomery. And then you have Jahmyr Gibbs too. So I mean, you kind of want to have a better balance. Jahmyr Gibbs, speaking of him, he had 13 carries for 84 rushing yards. Ron Ross St. Brown had a better game, having 11 receptions for 119 receiving yards. But that's a game that you for sure want to have back as a Lions fan and as a Lions in general. But I mean, it's week 2, like I said, so don't overreact to these types of losses. And it wasn't even a crazy loss. I mean, they lost by 4 points. The Buccaneers, they played against the Lions. We saw in the divisional round last year. That was a really good game too. It was close. Don't think that these teams are too far in terms of talent and things of that nature. So it was a really good game. I mean, both of these teams, I expect to see them in the playoffs. They definitely have encouraging signs. This is the last upset I would say that took place between the Cardinals and the Rams. And like I talked about it a little bit earlier, the Cardinals smoked the Rams, winning 41-10. The game was really over in the first half. First, let's talk about Kyler Murray before we talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. Kyler Murray went off. I mean, we just saw a lot of great plays, him getting out of the pocket. Yes, he is a small quarterback, but man, he uses that to his advantage, being able to scramble and run and really throw the ball at a high level, even on the run too. Completed 17 out of his 21 passing attempts, had 266 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Looked great and efficient. They bludgeoned the Rams in the running game too. James Conner center, had 21 carries for 122 rushing yards and a touchdown. And then Maserati Marvin Harrison Jr., he had 4 receptions for 130 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. I have him in my ESPN Fantasy League, man. Shout out to Marvin Harrison because that first game was not great at all. You saw Kyler Murray talk about it's not his responsibility to get in the ball. Well, hey, they had a great game plan going into week 2 because Marvin Harrison Jr. got the ball, had an extended touchdown, just going crazy. So, I mean, shout out to him. For the Rams, it definitely was a tough loss, but we have to talk about the injuries on their team. And I know Sean McVay won't want to use that as an excuse, but it's crazy. The offensive line is banged up. Puka Nacua got hurt in that game against the Lions, and then Cooper Kupp got hurt and is going to be on the injured reserve and miss some time again this season when he has the past few years as well, too. I mean, it's just really tough. The adversity that the Rams go through, it is a lot. If they're able to repair this season in the weeks ahead and still contend for the playoffs, that would be nice. But like I said, it is early, but that's just a tough blow in this game. And you saw the Rams get dominated by the Cardinals. So this game right here was arguably the game of week 2. A matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Cincinnati Bengals. And the Chiefs won by a field goal, winning 26-25. A really good game if you were able to watch it. And I will say, after playing terrible in week 1, the Bengals, they put on a better performance for sure. Joe Burrow, I'm specifically talking about because he's my fantasy quarterback and he let me down so bad in week 1. But he definitely played better against the Chiefs in week 2. Completed 23 out of his 36 passing attempts for 258 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Played a really good game. I will say one thing though that's still concerning. I mean, you can tell that Jamar Chase is still frustrated by not having that contract get done. So he only had 4 receptions for 35 receiving yards and the 2 touchdowns came from Yossi Vosh. So it definitely was an improved game for the Bengals and they have some good things going forward. I know in a few weeks they had to play against the Ravens, a divisional rival, but there were some encouraging signs. Premise is that they just always start slow, which isn't a good thing and isn't a good habit at all. And for the Kansas City Chiefs, wasn't the best game by them at all. Patrick Mahomes didn't play that great. He threw 2 picks, had 2 interceptions, only threw for 151 passing yards, and that interception of Cam Taylor-Britt was insane, I'm not gonna lie. He talked some trash about Xavier Worthy. He certainly backed it up, getting that one-handed pick, but ultimately they won the game from Harrison Butker game-winning field goal, so that's a good thing for them. Not the best game. They weren't as explosive as they were against the Ravens. They still found a way to win. Pacheco also being on injury reserve now due to a fibula injury is certainly going to hurt them. There's rumors about them potentially re-signing Kareem Hunt, who's a free agent right now, so that'll be more for the Chiefs to compensate for, but I still think that they'll be fine. The Sunday night football game was a pretty good one. It was here in the Houston area where I'm from, and it was a matchup between the Houston Texans and the Chicago Bears where the Texans won 19-13. Not the most electrifying game, but I will say that Texans defense looks really freaking good. Azeez Al-Shaair, Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter, Derek Stingley. I mean, I could just go on and on. They have a lot of defensive pieces that look really nice, and they made it hell for Caleb Williams because he was just doing too much. I mean, just that's the one thing to take away from this game. Caleb Williams was doing too much. This is not college, bro. You can't just run away from everything. He did that in week 1 against the Titans where he had that huge sack, and he was trying to do that too much against the Texans too, where the discipline needs to come because it's not like college, man. You're not going to be able to escape everything. Learn when to throw the ball away and be smart with the football, not doing too much. So that's one thing to take away from the Bears for sure because, I mean, he had some solid moments, but you kind of knew the Texans controlled this game from the start anyways. I mean, they had that opening drive to get a field goal and they ended up scoring a touchdown. It was just their game. And the offense didn't even play that crazy. CJ Stroud, he completed 23 out of his 36 passing attempts. He did have 260 passing yards and a touchdown, but overall, we know how explosive this offense has a potential to be in Houston. Nico Collins, I will say, he's the #1 takeaway. Like, by far, he's the #1 receiver. Dell is super talented, don't get me wrong, and Stephon Diggs is still a really good receiver in this league, but Nico freaking Collins, I think he's certainly a top 10 receiver in this league. The report that him and CJ has, the ability for him to get open, and also CJ Stroud simultaneously extending the play on his legs and then throwing the dot to him on a run. I saw that a few times in that game. Oh my gosh. I love the rapport, and Nico Collins looks great. I mean, he had 8 receptions for 135 receiving yards and a touchdown. Just really efficient football from Houston. Did see that Joe Mixon got hurt on the ankle play. It looked like a hip drop tackle that the league is trying to get rid of. So hopefully he's able to be okay because that sucks because Joe Mixon is a huge part of that offense. We saw what he did in week 1 against the Colts, having essentially 160 rushing yards. That's the really extra component that makes the Texans more deadlier. But yeah, this Houston team is really good. They're going to be nice in the AFC. It's certainly going to be interesting to see how they shape up in terms of the AFC and going into the playoffs because they should be favorites in the AFC South. And they are 2-0 right now. And talking about the Bears even more though, they're 1-1 now. And Caleb Williams, this is what it is. I mean, the NFL is not the same as college. I think that he certainly still has the potential to be a quarterback of the future for the Bears, but you can see moments of frustration from DJ Moore. I mean, just getting fed up with him a little bit, just on the mistiming of the throws, just him being routed by the Texans defense. It is frustrating if you're a Bears fan, but you still have some solid points going into the future. I mean, that defense is still really good because, like I said, the Texans have a dynamic offense and you only allowed 19 points from them. I mean, that's an encouraging sign right there. I will say that. The final matchup of NFL Week 2 was was the game between the Atlanta Falcons and the Philadelphia Eagles, and of course everyone expected the Eagles to win this game, and they had control of the game for a majority of it as well. But going down to the fourth quarter, just a lot of mistakes that ended up happening, and everyone's going to point to the Saquon Barkley drop. But yes, the Falcons ended up winning 22-21. Not gonna lie, it was a field goal fest at first, but in the second half and really going into the fourth quarter, that's where things got more entertaining. On that route by Drake London to really end the game and score that touchdown, he hit Darius Slay Jr. The little haha route digging to the left, going to the right side of the end zone. That perfect catch to Kirk Cousins. I mean, that was great, really executed. But drawing back to that Saquon Barkley drop, a lot of people are gonna say if he would have caught that ball, obviously that would have been game, first down, everything like that. But there's more than just one play that comes down to the game, because the Eagles defense, they had some good plays, I would say, for sure. I mean, they were able to sack Kirk Cousins a few times and create some pressure, but they weren't able to stop the run at a high level at all. Darnell Mooney ran the ball pretty well. He had a touchdown. Bijan Robinson, he was being able to be dynamic out of the backfield in terms of receiving and rushing. And Kirk Cousins on that final drive, he really sliced them up. In the game, he completed 20 out of his 29 passing attempts, had 241 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, Kirk played a really good game, and it was a great bounce back performance from the Falcons overall after how they played against the Steelers in week 1. For the Eagles, it really reminded me of how they lost that game in Seattle on Monday Night Football in 2023, and it was just another collapse. I believe this is the 4th time they lost the game after having a lead in the 4th quarter since the beginning of the 2023 season. That's not good. That comes down to execution, and ultimately you could blame it on Saquon, you could blame it on whatever, but defensively that wasn't a great performance that they put out. Offensively as well too, I know that AJ Brown is out, so you have to compensate for that too. And they still had a chance to drive it down the field and get a game-winning field goal. That last play, Jalen Hurts throwing the ball and getting an interception by Jesse Bates, I mean, I just don't know what that was about. So that wasn't great for the Eagles. But like I said, guys, it's week 2, so let's not overreact to everything. And I'm going to continue to emphasize that because, guys, it is so early. But it's a good win for Atlanta. A bad loss for the Eagles, but it's not time to panic. And I know it's ironic that I probably said it's not time to panic because in the thumbnail you see Caleb Williams on there. And I talked about earlier how he didn't have the greatest performance. But guys, it's week 2. It is so young. Let's stop putting people in the Super Bowl already. And this no discredit to the Saints or the Vikings or how any of these other teams have been playing, but bro, let's relax and calm down. The season is still so new. We saw last year, teams like the Jaguars started off 8-3, they collapsed, missed the playoffs. Teams get hot all the time, injuries happen, which we're starting to see right now, unfortunately, of course. Let's just stop crowning people as MVPs already. Putting people like Sam Darnold, Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield, even though that they're having some really good seasons so far, and Baker Mayfield out of those 3, that's who I really trust the most because I saw last year how he played. But besides that, man, we just have to see overall consistency. And I know the NFL season just started, everyone excited about football being back, but let's just let the season play out. Let's just see some more games take place. Just sit back and stay tuned. But with that being said, guys, I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments down below some of your biggest takeaways from NFL Week 2. Stay tuned for the biggest takeaways from NFL Week 3 and just overall more videos in general. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Know that you are loved, you are blessed, God loves you. Thank you for always watching my videos, even despite these recaps being longer. Of course, I'm going to try to make them a little more concise, but it's kind of hard because I want to talk about every game in detail and not just coast over every team. So yeah, but y'all have a good one. Be blessed. You are loved. Y'all have a good one.